Okay. Thank you, and thanks everyone for attending. I know we're late in the day, um, so we'll try to move through this efficiently. Feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. Okay. Sorry, this is new. Like in the. All right, hold on. This is like in the. Okay. So I'm going to cover a few things. I'll start with what I call the Contiem bias, because I think it's really important that you know where we're coming from in our perspective of content. I also want to cover a few concepts and definitions that I think are very critical to content production. I'll walk through a little bit of the way we view the life cycle, and we're here at MarkLogic World, so I'll cover a little bit about why we think, why we've used MarkLogic, and then talk to you a little bit about where content is going. So just briefly, our bias from where we come from, content is all we do. So this is our company. We have software services to help customers author, manage, publish, deliver content to clients worldwide. So as we mentioned earlier, we've got customers in 40 countries, and we've got operations around the world. So that's really important, because when you look at our client base, we were the very first application ever built on MarkLogic. We have a long history with MarkLogic, and we're really proud of that history. But you need to understand our customers, because when we talk about content, not all content is created equal. And it's important to understand where our clients are coming from. So when we talk about high value content, we kind of been our clients, and if you think of it as an enterprise, small, medium business kind of view. But you really have to look at it that we have customers that are truly, everyone says they're a world leader. Like, they are it. Their names, Boeing, Coca-Cola. Some you don't know. Dometic Group, you may not have ever heard of unless you own an RV, and then you know exactly who Dometic is. You have publishers, HarperCollins, you have Macmillan, you've got some of the biggest publishers in the world, American Express. When you are operating and you're producing either products or services for customers at that tier, and it's centered around high value content, they have a different perspective, and that's what I hope to share. We have many customers on the government side, and we love their mission. We heard from GPO earlier. We have House of Lords, House of Commons. We have some that you haven't heard of, like the Metropolitan Transportation Commission that does all transportation for San Francisco. And we also have another, which is rather unique and gets you into a CCMS, but a standards body and a standards board. And some of these customers are really, truly incredible. And again, it's going to paint a picture of why high value content is so critical to their organization. But you may not have heard of these. The Rail Safety Standards Board, I'll show you a content delivery application later. Rail Safety Standards Board provides all standards for all rail transportation in England. The Joint Commission, you probably never heard of, but it impacts you every single day. You cannot be a healthcare provider in the United States if you do not have a Joint Commission accreditation. And so all the content that they produce as an accreditation body is produced with our platform. And then you have some like the CFA Institute. We're not, if anybody, I'm guessing no one here is a certified CFA. To put it in perspective, I think everybody knows what a CPA is, a CFA, a Chartered Financial Analyst. Just to put it some context, if you have a CFA certification, the average salary is about $330,000 a year. So you can imagine the way they treat their content and the accreditation documentation, the tests and all of that. It's frankly comparable to clients that we have in the intelligence community, to just kind of put some context so you can understand why something like MarkLogic underneath the hood is super important, and the IET and so on. So I guess the message here is to really say for our clients, content is material to them. So let's talk a little bit about high value content. So content that is material to your business. I'm not talking about the day-to-day presentation of this or that. When our customers, all of our customers, content is everything. Okay, so it's obvious for a book or a journal publisher because they're selling you the book. But things like user manuals, journals, if you look at the issues that Boeing had, for example, with the 777 or the 737 documentation related, and how much that has cost them. We regularly have customers who have significant legal issues, and they never built a content production platform because that's just a user manual. Anybody can write that. And it turns out it's a profession, it's not a task. And so this is what we do. Component content management platforms are really critical, and it leads us to MarkLogic. And I think that part of it we should talk about. And so if you're not familiar with a CCMS, it's not a document system, okay? So this is the most important content your organization has. And so that content is decomposed into sections at the component level to create an environment often called create once, publish everywhere. Super important. So when we break sections up in a document at the component level, you think, well, geez, that's a lot of work. But when you have something, say, the about us, every one of us work for an organization. If you were to change your company name tomorrow, or if you were bought and you had to change your mission statement tomorrow, how long would it take you to update your content and everything you have, marketing, employment, all of it? In our system, it would take about 15 seconds to cut the new content in, press publish, and it goes to everything that you have ever linked to it, that paragraph. If you think of it in SharePoint, do you know where the sixth paragraph of the document you're reading, do you know what other documents that's in? So for transactional stuff day to day, you think, well, high value content, how is it the same? And it's not, because the transactional stuff day to day, you don't really care what's in the sixth paragraph. Maybe it's your notes, maybe it's an internal document. But if this is customer facing, if it's client facing, if it's how you monetize your business, if it's material to your business, something like we do all the document reviews for Home Depot. And so if you're opening a user manual and that manual is terrible, and of course it's the product fault, it's not the actual operator error, it can't be you, it's got to be a bad manual. And so those things have real cost to the business. And so if you're going to be in the high value content business, you really have to be a CCMS. So you really have to have a CCMS. And if you're going to play in the CCMS space, you need to speak standards, okay? Because if the job's not hard enough, you've got to produce content in a way that is industry compliant, interoperable. If you think of an aircraft manufacturer or an aerospace defense customer, a simple system delivered like the howitzer, for example, has 478 subcontractors. So if they're all producing content at the document level with no standards, you can imagine it's really hard to integrate that content. And so they use S1000D, and it's a modular system, and it's broken up. So if you're in the business where content is critical to you, directly or indirectly, you have to be able to create content that is both in a format that is consumable by others, but you also have to have a content structure. Most of the CCMS products that you see out there are really DITA related. So DITA is just an XML standard. Very few can do any. That's kind of what makes our particular product unique, in that we can handle any kind of content standard, any type of content structure. And it's really important because you don't want to, unless you're forced to, have a unique XML structure, and you have to figure out a way to put that in place so that you can reuse content. That's the name of the game, right? You're making this investment into content infrastructure. So it really needs to be an XML native data store, and it really needs to be componentized. And so you can kind of get a hint as to why, for us, something like MarkLogic works incredibly well. Two other points I want to make. I want to talk a little bit about content consumers, because I think this is a part that is really missing from the market. And again, our clients are somewhat the canary in the coal mine, because they are big. They're struggling under the weight of their own size. And so the introduction of a content consumer is really someone who is engaging with that content. And so our customers are looking for content consumer portals, content consumer applications. And so why is this important? And if you look at something like the Rail Safety Standards Board, which I was giving an example earlier, so we deliver it's called the rule book application. We deliver it out to 40,000 transportation operators across England. So if you take a train in England and you have anything to do with it inside that transportation infrastructure, that content consumer, you can imagine every possible tech manual, every possible safety standard for every possible job for everyone in England. That's a lot of documentation, and you can't just put that on a SharePoint portal and say, good luck. So it gets very complicated. So in this particular case, you have things like notifications. So you can imagine that a train operator who's getting a security alert, if you're running the train infrastructure, you want to know that the train operators, every single one of them, got the content specific to them at the moment it was produced, and they had to click, I accept, I've read it, right? This is another level of sophistication. This isn't just publishing content out. Those are static portals, which we all have in our company. These are dynamic portals where you can interact and engage. We see them. We sell a lot to management repair operations, because what they want to do is deliver to the consumer of the content at the point of consumption everything about either a user manual, a training manual, instructions on what to do. And it's dynamic. So they can comment and say, hey, I've read this. Whoever wrote this has never actually lived a day in the field. Surprising, right? And so that closed loop system has to be built. And again, you're not going to do that with SharePoint. So the most important thing is, if you're in high value content infrastructure, you really need to think about the consumer, because the consumer is engaging with your content, and that engagement is money, it's valuable, and you want that incorporated into your infrastructure. And then there's been a lot of talk about AI, and I highlighted the creativity, because that's a real problem, and I'll talk about it in a few slides. Again, in the high value content world, this is material, so you don't want a person or an algorithm to go off the reservation and start generating content about your product or your safety manual or your instructions. That's a really bad thing, because there's legal liabilities. So the takeaway from here is to really view it and say, and for the biggest companies in the world, the Fortune, really 100 and their marquee leaders, if you take a case like United Healthcare, where we're dynamically generating every small business coverage document through RSuite, through MarkLogic, you can imagine that it's an incredibly complex processing environment that has to have governance and control, very strict, very rigid. So when you think of your infrastructure and the high value content production lifecycle, you'll see a lot of companies that sell components of this. You'll see a lot of IT departments that are trying to string together these components to produce a system. And so the thing to remember is that you can't look at the finished product and say, well, that's pretty simple. It's just a user manual. I mean, we have a developer, we can write an API document. You can't think about the end product that is getting delivered to the consumer as simple, because what you have to think about is the governance through the entire chain. So, for example, we have a customer who hired us and outsourced their entire content production environment. Everything. They fired their entire staff and just said, put it in your platform and give us the content creators, fix this. Because they had a problem. They have tens of thousands of pages that they do one thing. They're a world leader at what they do, and it's probably in your house at home. and they got hit with a patent infringement. So the problem is all their stuff was in SharePoint. So now they have to go through 10,000 plus pages of content to find the sections that refer to the technical element that had to change so they could be compliant with the lawsuit. And oh, by the way, you have to produce it in like 6 languages. If you're selling Home Depot, you have to produce in 4. So now they have to redo the translations because they don't have a componentized content and translation memory manager. So they're paying for everything. Our guess is it cost them $750,000. Again, if they had started with us, it would have been about 15 minutes of work for us to do and a little bit of translation cost. So companies learn this always the hard way. I mean, this is not your first expense, and you were competing for a demanding IT budget that is shrinking. So you have to really understand, and in our case, the customer has moved forward. Everything is in a CCMS, so we can deal with changes. But if you start right to left, you have to think through the delivery of how you're delivering content, and then you start to work backwards, and you realize it gets very complex fast. Okay, so we have many customers who want to create in Word. They just want to be in Word. That's all they want to do is Word. They don't want to learn an XML editor. They don't want to do anything else. But oh, by the way, it has to be in some exotic industry standard and it has to be decomposed and structured. So all that transformation has to be hidden, the complexity from the consumer. So then after you do that, you have to automate the process because it's high value content. So you have to have workflow engines that are routing it. You have to know who approves it. It's super important. You have to have a full prominence and pedigree over the approval and release of content out. And it's got to be role-based, access, secure. This is the most important thing our companies do. It's important in their business, so they want to know. In fact, some of our customers, and we have one customer in particular who you'll know who it is because they happen to be a very large company in the Netherlands that actually, I think, owns half the town. And so they literally have to book they own the conference area because they have to sweep it for security to make sure the Chinese aren't stealing their stuff. Okay. So super important, high security, role-based access. So when you start talking about generating content, in the old days, we would send a Word file or a Word document around and pass around and say, okay, comment on this, and then you get SharePoint, everybody can comment. But if you have, if you're a standards body where you might have 20,000 reviewers or an internal company that has 700 reviewers, that's not really a viable option. And so you have to, better approach for security and insider threat is to say, you know what, this person's only responsible for this section. They're responsible for that section. It gets componentized, routed. You never see the sum of the parts. You only send what is needed to who is needed. And so that governance and control is critical. And so we see more bigger companies who are dealing with industrial espionage. We see obviously government agencies, but overall, this is a path forward that everyone has to take. So obviously it's got to be single sign-on, it's got to be integrated. So you've got, as you move forward in the security access controls and you componentize, you got to have an underlying database that supports that. Where there's a lot of talk about LLM and language models, we're crazy excited personally about what we're about to show in the AI area and the generation of content. It's very cool. I'll talk about it in a little bit. Some of it is hype, some of it is real. And then you've got to produce it in every kind of format you can imagine. Most of our customers generate content. They want it pushed out on both tablets. They want it pushed out on PDF and XML formats, HTML. If you name it, it's got to be interoperable so that it can get delivered to the end. So I bring this chart up because for most of us that are in this business, when we deal with IT organizations and when we deal with business units, they think of their entire infrastructure for their high value content around the simplicity of the content they produce. It's just an API documentation. It's just a user manual. It's very simple. Very few people have dynamic publishing environments, like the case of United Healthcare, which is incredibly sophisticated publishing environment. Most have very simple. They have to produce a user manual. They have to produce a document. Why do I have to spend all this money to put it into a CCMS in a MarkLogic infrastructure? And the answer is because if you're a company of size, $1 billion maybe, when you have a problem, you will absolutely regret it, and it will cost, if you're lucky, you'll get out of it for under $1 million. And so very expensive. And like I said, this example, it is largely for the generation of content through the production cycle. The case of UHC, for example, is done with MarkLogic, but in that case, most of us don't think about our health insurance. So just to put it in perspective, when you are a company and you insure someone in your company, most of us think that insurance is at the state level. It's not. It's actually at your zip code. Okay, so think of it simply. New York State and New York City have different carrier requirements. So you can imagine if you just have 200 people that you're trying to insure, that's 200 zip codes that get entered in. They have to pull the riders and the requirements for every one of those zip codes. And it has to dynamically generate a coverage document that gets routed for pricing and approval and pushed back out. And anybody who's been through an insurance renewal knows you have a few hours to, that the customer wants to see the quote and they want to see it, maybe in a day or two. Not a lot of time to do that. We do it for the entire United States for the healthcare. So what does a content platform look like? And I won't spend too much time on this. We're really proud of our product. We think it's the best in the world. But in general, when you think about componentized content platforms, I walk through the production cycle, things you should see. And again, it should be obvious at this point why we like MarkLogic. So, you've got, every one of them has a workflow tool. We have customers with, we have one that's got almost 9,000 workflows for their entire content production worldwide. So these are complex workflows. You got to know where you are. Some people just route content to reviewers because when it's componentized, you want to send it out to only the expert in their field. We only want them to look at this one piece. So you can't do this business if you don't have a really good workflow engine. The other thing is on the right-hand side, you'll see just really a whole host of utilities that are put on there. So whether you're going Word to XML or you're opening, in our case, this customer likes an XML editor. So whether you're doing the transformation or the publication out, you need those utilities into that publishing. These are sophisticated publishing infrastructures, but it's very sophisticated content. Okay, so you should be seeing those things. If you're in charge of the infrastructure, you don't want everyone operating in XML. You don't want to have to kind of go through that for every single person who has to look at the content. You want it to be in a Word-like environment, and you want to be able to do those transforms back and forth, and you want to be standards compliant, and you want to componentize it, and you want to put security on it, and you want to control it and have governance. That's what high-value content's all about. So if you look at where everyone is right now in the market, we're just flooded with AI requests, and some are actually really cool. Most, I tell them they watch too much television. We've been doing with MarkLogic, incidentally, we built the first production scale for a government customer. We did that with MarkLogic probably back in 2010, 2015. To build an AI, natural language processing algorithm. So we kind of know what scale is. We've been doing this for some time. There is just an enormous headwind right now in the content space. The best example I saw, Gen AI from a liability perspective was last year we got a presentation from the U.S. Patent Office, the EU operation, because they created this incredible artwork from Gen AI, and Getty sued over it. And I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but I thought it was pretty convincing because when they generated the image, they still had the Getty watermark in it. Okay, so that's how many Getty images they used to create it. And it's clearly watermarked. It's pretty obvious that it's Getty. And so those issues are being worked through. And so many of our customers have more sophisticated issues with content. So we do a lot of work for publishers. So a big part of that is how do you attribute the content to the generated content? So an author has to be paid for their work. So you could end up with a finished product, but you need to know the sources. So you need to have the full XML, provenance, and pedigree all the way through to the generated book, because the author, J.K. Rowling, may not have written a single line of the book. But if the story was created from her text and her image, then she needs to be paid. And so the authors need some confidence that that lineage is preserved. The other thing I'll say is that most companies that we deal with, really, when they talk to us, they're talking about a document infrastructure. And so we often get asked, well, why should I buy a MarkLogic infrastructure, or why should I buy an XML infrastructure if I have SharePoint? And for us, that's like a, how much time do you have? Because we could go through about 100 arguments. But I kind of alluded to it. It's really just, you can't find anything. I mean, that's the truth. You can't find anything, even if you have great file structures, great folder structures. You don't know what's on the 12th page in the 6th paragraph, and you don't know where that is. And that's a problem. And we know it's a problem because we're paid all day, every day to fix that problem. And so we have a case right now where a client was just fined several $1 million because their regulatory documentation was missing things. In fact, I would argue is non-existent. And so, yes, they have to fix it, but it's all manual because they don't have a content platform. So you have to go through thousands of pages to go in and fix the content. And so if you look at how difficult it is to find content, if you recognize that reuse is difficult, if not impossible, the time that it takes to do this manually versus really a click, which is publish, is not even comparable. So if you poll people who have gone to a CCMS, what they'll tell you is that overwhelmingly they'll tell you that it eliminates regulatory compliance issues. It gets rid of reputational damage, and the financial and workforce risks are pretty significant. So I put down at the bottom a couple user manuals. So this is pretty simple. It's from Craig Toole, but it gives you a sense for if you're buying a product at Home Depot or something like that. They have to produce anybody multilingual. You need a CCMS. Frankly, the translation cost savings is usually more than the cost of actually putting the platform in. And then you look at other content, like the one on the left, where in the blue, where the customer had to recall all of their documents and resubmit. They view it as an opportunity. So they said, okay, we're in a crisis. This is an opportunity to redo all of our content. So that's pretty exciting. So why do we, and I think most of you, since you're pretty familiar with MarkLogic, why do we care so much about it, and why were we the first customers? So when we say it can scale, our customers scale big time. So the intelligence application that what we built with MarkLogic, I mean, we're talking 100 million records, and it was pretty sizable. The security is a huge issue for us, not just role-based access, but really, it took me a while to figure out what an ACID-compliant database was, but after we did, it actually saved us. We had a customer who had a data loss issue, but it turns out they didn't have a data loss issue because MarkLogic had kept it all preserved. It was a human error. And they estimate it probably saved them $100,000 just by having the infrastructure in place. And so those things are important. Semantics, we have a semantic search in our infrastructure. Semantics around high-value content is almost a must. How you model data is super important. And native XML support. We talked a little bit about innovation. We regularly bring problems to MarkLogic that we have no answers for, but they do a great job in helping us work through those. So why make the investment? And I bring this chart up, and I love this chart, and I love this diagram because this is the truth. On the top right-hand side, it's a junk drawer. Most document systems are a junk drawer. That's all they are. But the problem is, when you start making a business case for investment, why should we invest in a high-value infrastructure? Well, content that is unorganized is unusable. You just simply can't use it. If you can't find it, you can't use it. It's of no value. It's no different than your house. And what you end up doing, just like your house, at least my house, if I don't organize that top drawer, then you end up buying the same thing over and over again. Content is no different. You reinvent the wheel. You end up having people rewrite things and redo things that have already been vetted and approved by your experts. And remember, it's high value content, which means the most senior people in your organization had to sign off. So you're chewing up the most important resources because you cannot figure out how to store your content, enrich your content so it can be discovered. And so the content really has to be structured and organized, not at the document level, at the granular level. Otherwise, what you end up with is that junk drawer at the top. So a CCMS is really what you get at the bottom, where at the component level, everything is organized. And, if you really want to do AI, which I encourage everybody, we've seen some incredible results with the work that we've done. Your content's got to be secure. It's got to be scalable, and you really need to enrich it. And so I'm not saying that taxonomists aren't creative, but I'm saying that taxonomists sometimes are not creative, right? And so they need to speak in the language the rest of us speak in. And so you really need tools to be able to generate rich, expressive metadata about that component and granular level content. Every one of our customers, honestly, they're single tenant. Okay, this is the most important thing they do. They'll use Azure, we'll put it out on AWS, but it's all single tenant. They're not sharing content with anyone. They don't want anybody else possibly touching it. They all want it SSO. So these kind of environments are safe places to run AI and next generation algorithms because you know that your content is not being used to train someone else or being shared, in the case of Getty, with others to create new artifacts. The other thing I'll say is that most of the AI algorithms that are being used are open source. So the training and the content, whoever owns that content has an enormous advantage. So where's the future right now? And just tell you where our clients are going, and we're pretty excited about it. So I would say most of the consumer products, it's hard to imagine why this hasn't happened sooner, but we do a lot of interactive manuals. You're going to get a barcode, you're going to click on it, and it's going to show you. We did a basketball net for Spalding, which was pretty cool, on how to assemble it. We've done for IT rooms, we've shown them how to build out the IT data center that they're reproducing all over the world. People are visual. They want to see it assembled. And that kind of content production, interactive manuals are a big part of our business. And it's hard to imagine that we're going to go backwards in that area. The other thing is that I told you about RSSB. We support up to 70, I think it's now 70,000 users in the UK. And it's all specific to them. It's specific to their job, their function, their role. People want surgical delivery of high value content, and they want it tailored and customized to them. So it's not just to a train operator or a repair technician. It's a repair technician at this grade, at this level, so they don't have to sort through it. Resources are scarce everywhere. So that delivery and how we deliver content, it can't just be a website. It's way more sophisticated than that. It's a delivery portal where people can interact and comment on it, and you learn quite a bit. And then the other thing is AI is already here. I give this example a couple of weeks ago. I was in Rio and I needed to go to a dinner, and I asked the Uber driver something, and he pointed to the Uber app and he said, just type it. And so I typed it, and it translated into Portuguese. He typed his response, translated back to English in real time. It's here, and so the ability to integrate that into the delivery of content is what it's all about. So where does that kind of leave us? The pink elephant in the room in my mind is always the belief that we are going to be replaced. And we hear this all the time from customers: are you afraid you're going to be replaced? And we're not going to be replaced, because at the end of the day, junk in, like the junk drawer, equals junk out. Okay, if you can't organize your content, most of the time we're doing a lot of work right now. If you take a statement, AI does a lot of great things, but you have to realize that someone has prepped that content. And so if you have 10,000 pages, context is everything. Just saying that, step 6 is blank in whatever that is. Step 6 for what? What product? What phase? What are we talking about, right? AI is not going to figure that out. You're going to have structure throughout your content. So the companies that are doing that are winning. And we still have, I would say, the creation innovation advantage for now, at least. But what we are seeing is the ability to move incredibly quickly. AI is a great follower for stuff where the content and the field has been prepped for them. But the reality is the big content owners have all the advantage. They have all the content, they have all the context, they have all the metadata. Our customers are meaning, Contiem and MarkLogic. Those clients have invested in an XML structure, some cases for 15 years. They are the huge winners. I mean, they're coming out of the gate with AI because they have the content field already prepared. They've prepped the content world for AI. So we're really excited about that. And the other thing is that we're going to the Frankfurt Book Fair in October. And what's dominating that discussion is it's just a great opportunity for content owners to generate new revenue in ways that we haven't really thought through. And that's really exciting when you have content. So the advantage we have is, if you can imagine, we have some publishers, and they're the largest in the world, they've already vetted their content. We know where it came from. So now they can generate books in minutes, and they know who to attribute it to. And hey, why not? If it sells, you don't have to sell a lot of copies if you can generate it in 5 minutes and print it in 15. So that's a pretty low cost infrastructure. And so the last thing I'll say is overall, we just have better quality products than we've ever had. I mean, if you look at a user manual from 10, 15 years ago compared to today, and especially interactive, everything we have content-wise is better. Tools like Grammarly, for example, they help all of us who are not a technical writer write a lot better, right? And so all of this is really encouraging for content in general. And the last thing I'll say is I put on the right-hand side, and we did this for a customer. We ran an AI. We have an AI data service to redact PII. And so we essentially replaced a human in the loop kind of function. But to kind of give you perspective, we ran 14 million pages through. And on the top right-hand side, out of almost 5 million redactions, you'll see 2 black boxes. And if you blew this up and you had the advantage of seeing the document in front of you, you would have no idea that that's a social security number, because the third black box, which is supposed to be left, is so badly damaged because it's an old document. It's the one that got away. We got flagged for that. So out of over almost 5 million PII redactions, we missed that one. So that's a 99.9 accuracy. We could never do that manually. Couldn't do it. The cost is prohibitive. And even if you didn't care about the cost, just having the process in place to ensure that you're going to do 5 million redactions, manual redactions over some documents that are 20 years old, you just can't do that. So we have to embrace it and move forward. Last thing I'll say is that if I summarize the whole thing, and I kind of stress this, you have to kind of understand where we're coming from. And I would encourage everyone, especially through these conferences, when you talk to organizations that are really big, really large, they have a different perspective, because they have liabilities around content that can be in the billions. They have liabilities that can be in the millions. And so they view the world differently, and there's a lot to be learned from them. But you really have to, if you're in an organization and you're in charge of that infrastructure, if you're the owner of the MarkLogic database, there's so much more you can do. But it requires a critical view of your tech stacks. And you have to remember, mistakes are super costly. So if you're going to be in the business of delivering your high value content to customers, you have to have a high value content infrastructure to do it. It's a different tool set. And again, hopefully you see why we like MarkLogic. You see why it works really well for us. And I think it's going to work really well for us going forward. We have a great relationship with them. We're very happy with our relationship. And AI has a place. There's a lot of fantasy and fluff, but we got a lot of use cases that, like the case of the PII redaction, it's hard to argue with it. And so from that perspective, I think, it's about sharing how things were done, how people implemented, and then together everybody can have a better infrastructure. So that's all I have. And I think I'm out of presentation time, but I've got time for some questions if you're interested. Thank you. Any questions? Are we just tired? Last chance. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Thinking about this organization that took like the data approach to data modernization, have you worked with any clients where you went through like a full cost of ownership, comparing what they were doing compared to how they would do it all on things?
Yeah. So have we gone through a total cost of ownership from, I think the Band-Aid approach is a great way of calling it, right? So people that built their content infrastructure over time and realize that they've outgrown it. Okay. Yes, we can absolutely help them. The interesting part is they often themselves don't know how much they're spending. Okay. Because if you're talking about the IT organization, they're basing the price on tools. They're not basing it on productivity of the employees. So quite often, it's, something we can do very quickly and sit down with someone and say, okay, you can often tell because of the customer base, we can often tell just going into an organization and where we think the inefficiencies exist, and you can pretty much work with them to come up with an estimate very quickly. But it is a staggering amount. And the other thing I'll say is interesting factoid is that when we do the managed service, so all of our content creators have to pass an exam. Doesn't matter what part of the world they're in, they have to pass an English exam and they have to pass a writing exam. Okay. In general, 2/3 never make it past that step. Okay. And that includes English teachers and people that have been doing it for 20 years. So the point of that is what we often see in writing departments is if they have 6, 8, 10 people, in reality, we can do the same work if they had a modern infrastructure with 1/3 of the staff. And then if you throw a modern infrastructure in, the cost would be a fraction. And it's just, that's part of the life cycle. Companies outgrow what they have. We did, everyone does. Cool. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Question. Besides MarkLogic, do you was saying any other product that complement in terms of incremental on right getting business going in the same member those product component about everything reorganization to even develop and member more bandship.
Yeah. So the question is, what other tools in addition to MarkLogic, what other applications really help
Within the progress?
Within the progress space? Yeah. So we've looked at a bunch of different products. Semaphore, we don't have a bias either way. We kind of look at it like, so Semaphore, the function of Semaphore, whether you like Semaphore or not, I think the argument is very strong that says if you're in a high value content business, you need the ability to create taxonomies. In our systems, when you create, if you used a Semaphore or a competitor product and you curate the metadata and create a taxonomy, it is simply a drop it in and we will update all the content to that new tagged model. So I liked tools that are about shifting from taxonomies to ontologies because it makes the content more discoverable. The business rules stuff, huge fan of. If you have dynamic publishing, really important. We have a very sophisticated business rules engine with 24,000 conditional variables at United Healthcare. You can't do that otherwise. And then, MarkLogic is coming out with their new capability to build apps, which I think is really awesome because a lot of times you either buy our system and MarkLogic comes with it, but often we get called in because they've already purchased MarkLogic. And what we see is the ability to build very simple web apps in combination with a platform like ours. Very powerful. So they might build dashboards, they might build things that are insights about the content that are specific to their business. That's what we want our clients to spend their money on. So I do think there's a bunch of progress products around that space, and they're not really in competition. They're really there to complement. It's a great question. Any other questions? Questions? Awesome. Look, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the event. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. And if you have any questions, I'll be here today and tomorrow. So thank you.